We are finally ready to say, y'all come back to winter here at Spindle Mountain Mercantile. Not that I don't love winter, I'm just jonesing to start working on creations covered with flowers, birds, and baby animals. So let's jump right in with project number 1. I sure hope it's not my pride, but whenever I have an idea that I thought of all by myself, I like to tell y'all, and this is one of those ideas. I had hoped I could use one of the labels from Ephemeral Melange, but it really didn't fit. I do think it would be great in another bottle that maybe was taller. You would probably have to round the edges, and that's what I had to do to this one that I found in Flora, Greca, which is in the new 2026 spring release from Iron Orchid Designs. I think this is actually the second time I took it back out of the bottle because I didn't think about rounding the edges. But like I said, this is a brand new idea, and I'm just seeing if I can make it work. Before I started rolling it up, I separated the backing sheet from the transfer and carrier sheet because I'm going to pull it out with tweezers once I get it right into place. I bought these awesome tweezers on Amazon. Do you think I can find them? No, I can't. Y'all, I got to do something about my mess and getting organized, but that's a whole nother thing. For right now, we're just using my free tweezers. I didn't get these out of a dumpster, though. I got them when my stitches were removed. I don't remember which stitches, though. But hey, free is free, right? Tweezers weren't great, but they were good enough to get that paper started, and then I just pulled it out with my fingers. Unfortunately, you can see right here, that transfer really moved. When I tried to put it back where I wanted it, part of it adhered and it tore. So I decided to go back to where it adhered by itself, and I just went with it. Next, I'm using a very long paintbrush and put it in upside down using the handle to rub on the transfer. And I decided to watch on the back because I could see where it was pulling away from the plastic carrier sheet. I just kept turning it over and checking. I also used those tweezers. I just moved the carrier sheet up with the end of the paintbrush a little bit at a time and kept turning it over to go back and check to make sure it was adhering. And as it went down, I just pulled it up more. Now, there were a couple places that didn't adhere, but again, it's hard to tell with this jar. You can see them there on the carrier sheet. And here I'm just pointing out, can you see the cracks? See on the little wing, and then one of the flowers was torn. I think those long tweezers would work really good for that part, by the way. I didn't burnish it because I can't. Now I'm ironing some lace and ribbon that I found at an auction in a trunk that I paid 50 cents for because nobody else wanted it. I got 2 trunks for $1. That was the minimum bid. I just tied them in a square knot, which is left over right, right over left. That's when I realized I should have done it on the other side, so the bird's head was on the opposite side of the handle. It's okay though, the ribbon laid so you could still see the bird head. I added some little florals to it, and I do wish I would have maybe put some reindeer moss or some little beads in the bottom for a little decorative touch. Because it tore, I am keeping it for myself, but I absolutely love it, so that's okay. I cannot wait to try it again. What do y'all think? I always try to include something that was super easy to make, and today it's project number 2. My AJ gifted me this great bottle. It was probably for wine or liquor, but it has a great big space where I can put all of my favorite transfer elements: words, florals, and birds. Flora Greca is my new go-to transfer book for all of those things in one place. This surface is big, but it's still a little bit curved. I don't know how you're going to have 0 wrinkles in something that's curved or places where it just kind of overlaps. Cutting it in different areas will help. When I do something with a curved surface, I start right in the middle and I just start rubbing away from there, and I let the transfer kind of show me where it wants to adhere first, and I go with that. Let me show you what I mean. When the entire transfer was adhered for sure, I lifted back that carrier sheet and I was so impressed because it had hardly any wrinkles. I love putting transfers on bottles, so finding a big one with a flatter surface was awesome. I burnished it with my fingers, and then there was one space that was just a little too spacey, so I added a butterfly and I covered the entire surface where the transfer is with Rust-Oleum 2x Ultra Cover in semi-gloss clear. If people don't know what IOD is and they look at this bottle, they're not going to know how easy it was to make it this pretty. I'm telling you from the get-go, Project 3 was my favorite today. I'm using Ephemeral Melange to make something I was inspired to create from Pinterest. This was the second book I ever bought from IOD, and it's still one of my favorite go-tos. I highly recommend it to IOD newcomers. Do you see that board back there? My sweet husband transformed it into something amazing I could never do myself. I'll show you more about that later, but while he is working on it, I'm going to go ahead and make some castings from Wreaths and Swags and Swags. For this, I'm using Iron Orchid Designs Air Dry Clay. Whenever I cast a mold that has a long continuous design, I like to use one long continuous piece of clay. This has a swag with two little bouquets of flowers hanging from each side. I laid down the clay and then pushed it into all the different little pieces and parts. Then I took my thumb and went over the edge, which is called a micro rim, and it makes it kind of like it's a knife and it just cuts off that clay. Then I used my fingertip to rub all of the back of the clay to make it smooth. So when it sits on my little board, it will be flat and it will adhere better. I flipped over the mold and just gently coaxed out the clay with my fingers. Now, if you use cornstarch, it will release better, but I don't like to do that because it leaves little pock marks. When I do that, I like to use tapioca flour, which is softer, thinner than cornstarch. For me, it just seems to make smaller pock marks. And seriously, even though tapioca flour is a little bit more than cornstarch, a little box is probably a lifetime supply for 3 IOD artists. At this point, my husband has just cut out a notch in the spindle so that it will fit over the board. He didn't attach it yet because he wants to make sure that it's the right size and it won't go over too much or maybe not go down enough on the board. So once that was in place, I started casting one of the swags from the mold called Swags. I don't need it to be as long as the mold is, so I only made it just a little bit longer than what I need. Before letting these pieces dry, I coated them with Debbie's DIY liquid patina in dark and decrepit. I put quite a bit on and I wiped off my brush and just pulled it back across where I had already applied it. Then I took a dry, clean cloth that's kind of fluffy and I pressed it down. I love the marks it made on it. I wish I could show you this better up close. Yeah, you just can't see it very well. But it was like a little crosshatch, you know, and it just looked so good. And I had to leave this part in because poor Rufus gets pushed right out of the way by Hamlet. Hamlet, he is so bossy. And yeah, I'm working on my couch. It's not my mama's couch, okay? Even though it's not glued on yet, that bottom piece was really snug. I let it sit all night so it would have the exact perfect shape. So I just had to think about it for a while, and I decided to maybe let it sit longer until I could perfect how to get it off of there. I went ahead and applied the transfer. And yeah, I have maybe 57 of those transfer sticks. Do you think I know where any are? They're with my tweezers, okay? I totally forgot to burnish this. You need to rub the top surface of your transfer after it's applied. That just makes sure that all of the little tiny pieces are in all of the little tiny nooks and crannies of whatever object you're working on. I'm using Type Bond Quick and Thick to attach the molds. You probably noticed that one of the molds broke. That's totally okay. I just mushed it up against the other part. No harm, no foul. Since most of you know how to glue, I thought I would take this time to tell you about my decor board. Can you see where my husband attached that spindle to the board? No, you can't, because I didn't do it with screws. He drilled holes through it and through the board, and then he put pegs in there. Y'all, it looks like it was made 200 years ago by some guy who works in his shop all the time. If you're interested in knowing how to make those, let me know in the comments. And also, if you're not interested, let me know if you would want to maybe purchase some of these. We're thinking about making them and selling them on our website. Even though I really like how that design looked when I just patted the darkened Decrepit with the towel, it was way too light for this project, so I added a second layer, and I let this one dry a little bit more before I wiped it back with my cloth. Next, I added some frayed drop cloth and lace that I found on the side of the road. I'm cutting off the part of the lace that's hemmed at the top that makes it ruffled. It makes the lace a little bit longer and it's flat, so it's easier to tie a bow that looks right, or a knot, which is what I tied here. My friend Kristen from Simply Joy with Kristen suggested I start selling some of the lace and ribbon that I use on my projects, so look for those in my website as well. If you're one of my regular viewers, you may have guessed this is one of my more is more projects. So now we're adding Debbie's DIY liquid patina in the color Pennies from Heaven, which is a copper patina. I have just restocked this on my website and in my shop in upstate South Carolina. Our website is called spindlemountainmercantile.com, and I will leave a link for it in the description. You can find DIY, IOD, my mama's quilts are on there, some napkin packages for decoupage, and the things that I've been talking about in this video will be added as well. Upcoming, you'll see milk paint. Plus, Mama and I are going to start adding some of the creations we make right here in our videos. I did not wipe off the liquid patina that I put on the molds. I added some to the sides of the board as well, and some of the spindle, and those areas I wiped off. I added Debbie's DIY wax in clear on top to make sure everything was sealed, and I think y'all can see now why this is my favorite project today. As per my usual, I forgot to take a before picture of project number 4. This is one I found online. I want to add some molds to this. This was, again, inspired by Pinterest. I thought for sure one of my most go-to molds, Julia, would be perfect for it. This mold is huge. It is the whole entire surface of the mold. And here's what it looks like when you're done. Well, I thought I could just put it on top of that round part, then put the lid on and it would cut it where I needed it. No. Then I thought, okay, I'll just take the flowers apart and add them where no. See how I'm talking? That's what it was working like. So I gave up and I pulled out Wreath and Swags, which is becoming a really big go-to. And I've seen a lot of other people use it too. So I do recommend this mold as one of the first ones to get if you're new to it. Again, I'm using Type Bond Quick and Thick. Because it keeps my fingers cleaner, I like to use a brush to spread out the glue. But with the side going down and then trying to make it go on the top just to where the lid goes into that divot, it was It was so much easier just to use my finger. Debbie's DIY Paint in Crinoline is my absolute go-to when I want something that's just kind of white adjacent. It's like the color of fresh butter some Amish woman just made, or somebody else who has time for that kind of thing. I did one coat, and I'm not using a great brush because I wanted to really cram it down in there into all the crevices. And you can see here, this is the next day after it dried. I'm adding a second coat. There were quite a few places where you could still see the cracks. Once that dried, I started adding liquid patina, dark and decrepit. That's been a go-to too. I love that stuff. The one thing I thought maybe I did wrong here was I did not wipe it down in between painting different sections. So maybe I should have painted the molds and wiped them down, and then the wood around the bottom under that and wiped it down, and then the top and wiped it down. I painted the whole entire thing with dark and decrepit, and then I wiped it down. You can see a big white blotchy mark in one of these next videos on the right hand side. That's where I was holding it with my hand to do around the edge, and the dark and decrepit just came off with my hand. So I thought about going back over it with more dark and decrepit, but I started liking the light color. So I rubbed off more of it. And then I went back with a wet cloth and I did the very abrupt edges and wet distressed it. I added a little bit of greenery and some lace to the knob. Even though I'm crazy about how this turned out, I think I'm going to add some Pennies from Heaven copper patina just to the molds. Is that something y'all would do? Or would you leave it like this? For project number 5, I'm doing one of my favorite things to make. It's a miniature vignette, and I'm using my JB Weld 2-part epoxy. I almost cried when this wouldn't come out of the bottle. Y'all, I don't know if you can tell how thick it is. It's supposed to be in liquid form. You know, things just got ruined in my trailer when we had that heat and cold and heat and cold. It was below freezing, and the next day was 84 degrees, and that happened about 3 times within a 2-week period. Actually, it might have happened more than that. Anyway, I didn't have the heat turned on in my trailer or the air, and a lot of stuff was, I thought, ruined. But once I mixed this together, you have to mix it until it turns white. This is sped up about 15 times regular speed, and you can see it's kind of liquefying. So I thought, okay, we're just going to try it and see if it works. I have this thing that looks like a candlestick, but you see that hole in the top? It's threaded. I think this was a lamp base. So you could really use a candlestick or a lamp base. And I'm showing you the plate, so you know I'm using an antique plate, but I can actually get more for this plate than I can if I sell it alone. Technically, it's a saucer. I'm using a toothpick to add the 2-part epoxy only to the raised rim of this base. Then I'm going to put the plate upside down and put the base on it so that I know it's in the center. It's easier to find the center this way. For the top, I'm using a chimney from an old oil lamp and part of a leftover spindle. I thought I would put it this way, but I think it looks better with the top like that. I put the epoxy right around where the spindle goes into the bottom of the chimney. At this moment in the filming, I was way more concerned about my 2-part epoxy working than I was about you seeing what I was doing. That's why I was a little off center there. To help it dry, I turned the bottom part right side up and put a little book stack on it. And I am putting the spindle down for the top part and wiping off the glue really carefully with a damp paper towel. I'm leaving this with the glass up because if that glue drips, I don't want it to go down inside of the glass. I would rather have to clean it off of the wood. I asked my sweet husband for a little piece of leftover spindle that was maybe an inch or an inch and a half tall, and I'm so glad he brought me one that was a few inches tall because this deer did not fit on the section of the chimney where it got smaller, and that's where it would have been with a smaller little spindle piece. I made sure I could get it in there, and then I just used my glue gun to attach the mama deer and the baby to the top of that little spindle leftover piece. Now I'm checking to make sure it goes back in, and I realized if I lift the tushy part up first, it goes in quite easily, and came out pretty good too. I'm cutting off some ivy that I got for free at a marketplace. I went to meet somebody from Marketplace, and she said, "Hey, you want some crafting supplies?" I said, "Sure." She said, "You can have everything I have for $10. So I guess it wasn't free, but pretty much. I glued the ivy around about right in the center of this spindle piece. And I made it so that the little pointed parts were just kind of going this way and that way. And you would just see them over the top of the rest of the floral I'm doing. I wanted a more muted floral, but I thought that pop of bright green would look pretty if it was coming from underneath the rest of it. Next, I did the same thing with some eucalyptus pieces I cut off of a stem. I don't know if I show this part, but they hung down too low on the bottom, and that was fine. I wanted them to end abruptly. I wanted the bulk of it to be seen, but at the bottom, I just cut it off flat. I'm using this greenery that has little tiny leaves, and I found it at Dollar Tree. I have used this so much. I went back and bought several stems in case they stopped carrying it, but a little bit goes a long way, and that kind of seems to be a theme today, ain't so? I want this mama and baby to look like they are sitting on a tree trunk in the forest, so I just glued some different pieces of that greenery right up where they're sitting on that spindle top. I added another row of the same greenery all the way around the base. Another great Dollar Tree find were these florals. I think I got maybe 5 different colors. I decided to use blue, cream, and this kind of salmony color because those are the colors of the florals in the plate. I just went through and cut off little sections. It's almost like a lilac bunch. Just doesn't smell as good. Not that I go around smelling my Dollar Tree florals. Although, come to think of it, I have seen other people in Dollar Tree smelling things that maybe some of us don't smell. But I digress. I put more of the blue than I did of the salmon colors. I wanted this to look more springy, and the salmon seemed a little bit more fall-y. At this point, it was time to put the whole shebang back in the chimney, and it was it did not want to go in. I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I realized there's so much bulk from the floral. It was really kind of smushed in there, but I lifted up that little tushy and I scooted it in, and I thought, oh, please, dear Lord, don't let the glass break from all this pressure. And it did not. So thank you, Lord. The greenery that I put around the bottom, even though I didn't smush it when I glued it on, it still was way too far away from what would normally be the top of the chimney. Now that it's upside down, it's the bottom. So I just stuck some in there to see what it would look like, and it was good. I took it back out, added a little bit of glue, and barely pushed it up in there. It doesn't matter if it's really secure because this whole piece is going to be glued down to that saucer. I'm just not doing it right now because I'm going to wait until I have another epoxy project, and I will do it at the same time. Where the chimney is attached to the spindle, I'm going around it with my hot glue, and then I'm adding a piece of velvet ribbon. I made where it connects in the front so you can't see the seam because I'm covering that up with a bow. To make the bow, I just took another piece of the same velvet ribbon and I put a dot of glue on where the two pieces meet, added the second piece of ribbon, looped it around, put another dot of glue on top of that, and then made another loop. And I pushed down super firmly between all of these because I want that glue to go up inside the weave of the ribbon to make it super secure. I added some more of the little lilac bushy style florals and then put one little floral head on top of that. And now you can see why these Apothecary diorama style miniature vignettes are some of my favorite things to create. We are so glad y'all clicked on this video today and gave us a try if you're new here. And for those of you who are already addicted to our channel, we really appreciate you coming back again. If you did like the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and you want to join our channel if you haven't yet, because just for our subscribers, we are preparing to launch a Facebook group where y'all can share your own creations, your YouTube channels, and other social medias where you share what you made. Don't forget to go down to the comments and tell us if you would like to find out more about my sweet husband's decor boards and any other things that he makes that you guys might like to purchase, or learn how to make it yourself. Pretty soon you can find those things on our website at spindlemountainmercantile.com. Until you see us again next time, we hope you have a wonderful week. And as always, we hope you are blessed. Bye.